The sun hung high over the dry, cracked earth of the desert. The wind blew across the vast open land, stirring up the dust and sending it swirling through the air. In the distance, a small Apache camp rested quietly, surrounded by nothing but the harsh, unforgiving wilderness. Among the people of the camp was a young Apache girl named Ayanna. She was about 16, with long, dark hair that tumbled down her back like a waterfall. Her brown eyes were filled with both strength and sadness, for she knew her life had changed forever. Ayanna had grown up in a close-knit Apache family, one that cherished their traditions, their land, and each other. But lately, life had become unbearable for her family. The drought had lasted for months, leaving their crops to wither and their animals to die of hunger. The once proud Apache tribe found themselves struggling to survive, with little hope of better days ahead. Ayanna's father, a respected man among their people, had become desperate. He knew his family couldn't survive much longer on what little they had left. But instead of turning to his people for help, he made a difficult and heartbreaking decision. He would sell his daughter to a rich settler in exchange for food and supplies. Ayanna was stunned when her father told her the news. She couldn't believe her ears. How could he make such a decision? She had been raised with love, respect, and the understanding that family and traditions were the most important things in life. But now all of that seemed to be slipping away. Her heart sank as she realized there was no way out. Her father's decision was final, and there was nothing she could do about it. The day of the sale arrived, and Ayanna felt like her world was falling apart. She stood nervously in the small trading post, her hands trembling as she waited for the exchange to happen. Her father stood beside her, talking to a wealthy settler who had come all the way from the east. He was a large man, with a thick beard and a face that showed no sign of emotion. He eyed Ayanna as if she were nothing more than a piece of property, something he could buy and sell at will. "I'll take her," the settler said, his voice deep and flat. Ayanna's heart raced. She wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but she couldn't. Her father's gaze met hers, and there was no warmth in his eyes. She saw only the coldness of someone who had given up hope. He had made his choice, and now she had no choice but to accept it. The cowboy, who had been quietly watching from the corner of the trading post, could sense something was wrong. He had been passing through the area looking for work when he overheard the conversation. At first, he didn't know what was happening, but as he heard more, he quickly realized what was going on. This young Apache girl was about to be sold, and the idea filled him with anger. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The cowboy, named Jack, had spent most of his life working on ranches and traveling the open plains. He was a man who had little patience for injustice. His weathered face and worn clothes spoke of a life spent under the hot sun and in the unforgiving wilderness. Jack had seen a lot in his time, but this was something that stirred something deep inside him. He couldn't let this happen, not to Ayanna, not to anyone. With a steady stride, Jack walked up to the group at the trading post. He didn't care that he was interrupting. He wasn't there to make friends, but to stop a terrible act from happening. He stood tall, his hand resting on the worn leather of his gun belt, his eyes never leaving the settler. "What's going on here?" Jack asked, his voice calm but firm. The settler turned to him, sizing him up quickly. "This doesn't concern you, cowboy," the settler sneered. "I'm buying this girl." "It's none of your business." Jack didn't flinch. He had dealt with men like this before, greedy, arrogant, and willing to treat others as if they were objects. But Jack wasn't going to let that happen. "I think it is my business," Jack said, his voice growing more serious. "No one should be sold like that, not even an Apache." The settler glared at him, but Jack stood his ground. The air between them thickened with tension. Ayanna looked at the cowboy, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know him, but there was something about him that gave her hope. Something that told her he wasn't like the others. He wasn't like the man who had come to buy her. Her father, too, seemed to hesitate. He looked from Jack to the settler and back again. It was clear that he was caught in a difficult position. He had made his decision out of desperation, but now, with the cowboy's interference, he didn't know what to do. His pride as an Apache man was crumbling, and for the first time he realized what he had done. "This is my daughter," Ayanna's father said, his voice trembling. "I need the money. I don't have a choice." Jack's eyes softened, and for a moment he could understand the pain the father was feeling. The struggles of the Apache people had been long and painful. He knew what it was like to be desperate, to feel like there were no options. But he also knew that selling a child was never the answer. "I'm not here to make you feel worse, but what you're doing is wrong," Jack said quietly. "You've lost hope, but I haven't. I'll help you. I'll help you find another way." But Ayana's father couldn't see that. His desperation clouded his judgment, and he wasn't ready to listen. He had made his decision, and it was too late to turn back. Jack's gaze then shifted to Ayana. She stood there silently, torn between her loyalty to her father and her fear of what would happen to her. Her eyes were filled with confusion, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. She didn't want to go with the settler, but she also didn't want to anger her father. That's when Jack made his decision. "You're coming with me," he said, his voice low but resolute. Ayana's eyes widened. She didn't know what to say. She had never seen a man stand up to her father like that before. The settler scoffed, clearly not liking what he was hearing. "Don't you dare try to stop this, cowboy," the settler growled. But Jack wasn't backing down. His hand remained on the gun belt, his posture unyielding. He wasn't going to let the settler take Ayana, and he wasn't going to let her father's decision ruin her life. "You don't have to do this, Ayana," Jack said softly. "I'm not taking you away from your people, but I'm not letting you be sold like this." Ayana looked at her father one last time, but she didn't see the man she once knew. Instead, she saw a stranger, a man who had lost his way. She felt the weight of the decision heavy on her heart. But she knew in that moment that Jack was offering her something her father no longer could, a chance at a life beyond this. Without another word, Ayana took a deep breath and nodded. Jack, sensing her decision, quickly stepped forward, motioning for her to follow. Together, they walked away from the trading post, leaving behind the life Ayana had known. As they disappeared into the desert, Ayana felt a strange sense of freedom. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hope. And for the cowboy Jack, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. As the dust of the trading post settled behind them, Ayana followed Jack through the desert. The sun was beginning to dip low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren land. She couldn't believe what had just happened. In one moment, her life had been turned upside down. The familiar sounds of the trading post, the voices of settlers, and the chatter of the market were now a distant memory. Ayana's heart raced as she tried to process what had just happened. She had always been taught to respect her elders, especially her father, but today everything had changed. Jack didn't say much as they walked, his steps purposeful and steady. He knew the desert well, its quiet beauty and its hidden dangers. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and the distant smell of rain, though it hadn't rained for months. Ayana, still shaken by the events, tried to match his pace, but her legs felt heavy. The journey ahead seemed endless, and she had no idea where it would lead. As they walked, Jack glanced over at Ayana. She looked so young and fragile, caught in a world much bigger than herself. Her long black hair blew gently in the wind, and her eyes seemed lost, staring at nothing in particular. Jack knew that in time she would find strength, but for now he could see the fear and confusion in her eyes. It reminded him of how he had once felt when he was just starting out, lost, unsure, and trying to find his place in a world that didn't always make sense. "You okay?" Jack asked, his voice soft but concerned. He had been paying attention to the way Ayana walked, noticing how she seemed to stumble every now and then, her steps heavy with exhaustion. Ayana didn't answer right away. She didn't know how to explain what she was feeling. How could she put into words the storm that raged inside her? She had been torn from her home, from everything she had known, and now she was walking through the desert with a man she barely knew. Yet somehow there was a strange sense of safety with him. Ayana had seen enough in her short life to understand that not all men were kind, and she had learned to be wary of them. But Jack was different. There was something about him, something trustworthy. Even though he had intervened in a way that had cost her father's trust, he hadn't treated her as a burden or a possession. He had treated her like a person. "I'm not sure," Ayana finally said, her voice quiet. "I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what will happen next." Jack nodded, understanding her confusion. He had lived through moments like that himself, times when the path ahead wasn't clear, when every step felt uncertain. He was a man of few words, but in that moment, he knew the journey they were about to take was going to be long and difficult. He had no guarantees, no promises to offer her. But he did have one thing: a deep respect for her and a promise to help her find her way. "One step at a time," Jack said, glancing back at her. "We'll figure it out together." They continued their journey through the desert, and the first few days were challenging. The heat was relentless, and the land offered little in the way of shelter or water. Jack had a knack for finding sources of water hidden beneath the surface of the dry earth, and he taught Ayanna how to spot them. At first she was skeptical, but soon she learned to trust his instincts. She watched as he dug in the earth, uncovering small springs of cool, clear water that they could drink from. These small moments of survival were lessons in themselves, and Ayanna began to feel a sense of confidence she hadn't known before. At night, they would set up camp under the vast, starry sky. The desert was a place of silence where the world seemed to hold its breath. Jack would start a fire and Ayanna would sit beside it watching the flames flicker and dance. The heat of the fire contrasted with the cold desert air, and the sound of the crackling wood was comforting. Jack would cook whatever little food they had, and they would eat in quiet companionship. Ayanna found herself learning more about the cowboy each night. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke louder than anything he could say. On the third night, as they sat around the fire, Ayanna spoke up. "Why did you help me? I don't understand. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Jack looked at her, his face illuminated by the firelight. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Ayanna could see that he was thinking, carefully choosing his words. She could tell he wasn't a man who opened up easily, and maybe that was part of the reason she trusted him. He wasn't like other men she had known, men who spoke loudly and acted like they had all the answers. Jack didn't need to explain himself, but Ayanna wanted to know. She wanted to understand why he had risked everything to help her. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice steady but soft. "I've seen too much of people being treated wrong. I've seen people get hurt over and over again, and I can't stand by and watch it happen. I don't care where you come from or what tribe you belong to. You're a person and you deserve more than to be sold like cattle." Ayanna was quiet for a long time, absorbing his words. She had never thought of it that way before. She had always seen her life in terms of survival, of doing what was necessary to keep going. But Jack had a different way of seeing things. He saw the world as something worth protecting. In that moment, Ayanna realized that Jack wasn't just helping her to survive. He was giving her a chance to live. The next few days were spent crossing the desert, heading toward the mountains. The land became more rugged and rocky, but it also offered more shelter from the heat. Ayanna grew stronger with each passing day. Jack taught her how to ride a horse, how to handle a rifle, and how to move silently through the wild. The more she learned, the more her fear began to fade. She was no longer the helpless girl waiting to be sold. She was becoming someone capable of surviving on her own. But even as Ayanna grew stronger, the weight of her past still lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling of guilt every time she thought about her father. She didn't know what had happened to him since she left, and the thought of him still haunted her. Had he regretted his decision? Was he still searching for her? Part of her wondered if she would ever see him again. And if so, what would happen when they did meet? One evening, as they sat by the campfire, Ayanna finally spoke about her father. "Do you think he'll come after me?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Jack didn't answer immediately. He stared into the fire for a long time, as if weighing his words carefully. "I don't know," he said finally, "but you don't have to worry about that now. You're safe with me." Ayanna nodded, but deep down she wasn't sure if she believed him. She still had a lot of questions, and there were so many things she didn't understand. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was starting to find her place again. And maybe, just maybe, the journey ahead would help her find more than just survival. It would help her find herself. The road ahead was uncertain, but Ayanna knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone anymore. Jack had made sure of that.